Uber just released a new airport shuttle service
Yeah.
in New York City. It costs $18 a person. You book a seat. It goes on a designated sort of route on a set schedule. I don't have a question. I just wanted to congratulate you on inventing a bus.
It's a better bus.
Well, Casey, one of the biggest developments over the past few months in tech is that self-driving cars now are actually working.
Yeah, but this is no longer in the realm of sci-fi.
Yes. So we've talked obviously about the self-driving cars that you can get in San Francisco now. It used to be two companies, Waymo and Cruise. Now it's just Waymo. And there have also been a bunch of different autonomous vehicle updates from other companies that are involved in the space. And the one that I found most interesting recently was about Uber. Now, as you will remember, Uber used to try to build its own robotaxis. They gave that up back in 2020. That was the year they sort of sold off their autonomous driving division to a startup called Aurora after losing just an absolute ton of money on it. But now they are back in the game, and they just recently announced a multi-year partnership with Cruise, the self-driving car company. They also announced an expanded partnership with Waymo, which is going to allow Uber riders to get AVs in Austin, Texas, and Atlanta, Georgia. They've been operating this service in Phoenix since last year, and that's going to keep expanding. They also announced that self-driving Ubers will be available in Abu Dhabi through a partnership with the Chinese AV company WeRide. And they've also made a long-term investment in Wave, which is a London-based autonomous driving company. So they are investing really heavily in this, and they're doing it in a different way than they did back when they were trying to build their own self-driving cars. Now they are essentially saying, we want to partner with every company that we can that is making self-driving cars.
Yeah, so this is a company that many people take several times a week, Uber, and yet I feel like it sometimes is a bit taken for granted. And while we might just focus on the cars you can get today, they are thinking very long term about what transportation is going to look like in 5 or 10 years. And increasingly for them, it seems like autonomous vehicles are a big part of that answer.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting, so Tesla had this Robotaxi event last week where Elon Musk talked about how you'll soon be able to hail a self-driving Tesla. And what I found really interesting is that Tesla's share price plummeted after that event, but Uber's stock price rose to an all-time high. So clearly people think that Uber's approach, or at least some investors think that Uber's approach is better here than Tesla's.
It's the sort of thing, Kevin, that makes me want to talk to the CEO of Uber.
And lucky for you, he's here.
Oh, thank goodness.
So today we're going to talk with Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi. He took over at Uber in 2017 after a bunch of scandals led the founder of Uber, Travis Kalanick, to step down. He has made the company profitable for the first time in its history, and I think a lot of people think he's been doing a pretty good job over there. And he is leading this charge into autonomous vehicles, and I'm really curious to hear what he makes, not just of Uber's partnership with Waymo, but of sort of the whole self-driving car landscape.
Let's bring him in.
Let's do it. Dara Khosrowshahi, welcome to Hard Fork.
Thank you for having me.
So you were previously on the board of the New York Times Company until 2017 when you stepped down right after taking over at Uber. I assume you still have some pull with our bosses, though, because of your years of service. So can you get them to build us a nicer studio?
I didn't have pull when I was on the board, and I certainly have zero pull now. I've got negative pull, I think. They're taking revenge on me.
Well, since you left the board, they're making all kinds of crazy decisions, like letting us start a podcast and stuff.
Oh, my God.
But, all right, so we are going to talk today about your new partnership with Waymo and the sort of autonomous driving future. I want to talk about this partnership with Waymo, and I would love to hear the story of how this came together, because I think for people who've been following this space for a number of years, this was surprising. Uber and Waymo have not historically had a great relationship. The two companies were
It was a little rocky at first,
embroiled
yes.
in litigation and lawsuits and trade secret theft and things like that. It was a big deal. And so did they approach you? Did you approach them? How did this partnership come together?
I guess it's time healing, right? When I came on board, we thought that we wanted to establish a better relationship with Google generally, Waymo generally, and even though we were working on our own self-driving technology, it was always within the context of we were developing our own, but we want to work with third parties as well. One of the disadvantages of developing our own technology was that some of the other players, the Waymos of the world, et cetera, heard us, but didn't necessarily believe us. It's difficult to work with players that you compete. So one of the first decisions that we made was we can't be in between here. Either you have to go vertical or you have to go platform strategy. You can't achieve both. At least you can't achieve both well. And
Meaning
we had to make
either have to do our own thing or we have to do it with partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that strategic kind of fork became quite apparent to me. And then the second was just, what are we good at? Listen, I'll be blunt, we sucked at hardware, right? We tried to apply software principles to hardware. It doesn't work. Hardware is a different pace, different demand in terms of perfection, et cetera. And ultimately that fork, do we go vertical? And there are very few companies that can do software and hardware well. Apple, Tesla are arguably one of the few in the world. And we decided to make a bet on the platform. And so once we made that bet, we went out and identified who were the leaders. Waymo was a clear leader. First, we had to make peace with them and settle in court, et cetera. We got Google to be a bigger shareholder. And then over a period of time, we built relationships and I do think there's a synergy between the two. So it just makes sense, the relationship, and we're very, very excited to, on a forward basis, expand it pretty significantly.
So this was, I feel like, maybe your most consequential decision to date as the CEO of this company. If you believe that AVs are going to become the norm for many people hailing a ride in 10 or 15 years, it's conceivable that they might open up the Waymo app, right? And not the Uber app. Waymo has an app to order cars. I use it fairly regularly, right? So what gave you the confidence that in that world, it will still be Uber that is the app that people are turning to and not Waymo or whatever other apps might have arisen for other AV companies?
I think first is that it's not a binary outcome, okay? I think that a Waymo app and an Uber app can coexist. We saw it in my old job in the travel business, right? I ran Expedia, and there's this dramatic, is Expedia going to put the hotel chains out of business, or the hotel chains going to put Expedia out of business? The fact is both thrived. And there's a set of customers who books through Expedia. There's a set of customers who books Hotel Direct. And both businesses have grown, and interactivity in general has grown. Same thing if you look in food, right? McDonald's has its own app. It's a really good app. It has a loyalty program. Starbucks has its own app, has a loyalty program. Yet both are engaging with us through the Uber Eats marketplace. So my conclusion was that there isn't an either or. I do believe there will be other companies. There'll be cruises, and there'll be WeRides and Waves, et cetera. There'll be other companies and self-driving choices. And the person who wants utility, speed, ease, familiarity will choose Uber. And both can coexist, and both can thrive, and both are really going to grow because autonomous will be the future eventually.
So Uber just announced a partnership with Waymo that is going to take place in Austin and Atlanta. But who is actually paying for the maintenance of the cars? Does Uber have to sort of make sure that there's no trash left behind in the cars? What is Uber actually doing in addition to just making these rides available through the app?
Sure. So I don't want to talk about the economics because they're confidential in terms of the deal. But in those two cities, Waymo will be available exclusively through the Uber app. And we will also be running the fleet operations as well. So depots, recharging, cleaning, if something gets lost, making sure that it gets back to its owner, et cetera. And Waymo will provide the software driver, will obviously provide the hardware, repair the hardware, et cetera. And then we will be doing the upkeep and operating the network, so to speak.
For riders, if you want to get in a Waymo in one of those cities through Uber, is there an option to specifically request a self-driving Waymo, or is it just kind of chance? Like if the car that's closest to you happens to be a Waymo, that's the one you get?
Right now, the experience, for example, in Phoenix, is that it's by chance. I think you got one by chance, and you can say, yes, I'll do it or not. And I think that's what we're going to start with. But there may be some people who only want Waymos, and there are some people who may not want Waymos. And we'll solve for that over a period of time. It could be personalizing preferences, or it could be what you're talking about, which is I only want a Waymo.
Do the passengers get rated by the self-driving car the way that they would in a human-driven Uber?
Not yet, but that's not a bad idea.
What about tipping? Like if I get out of a self-driven Uber, is there an option to tip the car if you did a good job?
I'm sure we could build that. Why not?
Honestly,
I don't know. I do wonder if people are going to tip machines. Yeah. I don't think it's likely, but you never know.
It sounds crazy, but at some point someone is going to start asking because they're going to realize it's just free margin. It's like even if only 100 customers do it in a whole year, I don't know, it's just free money.
Totally.
I mean, the good news is tipping 100% of tips go to drivers now, and we definitely want to keep that. So we like the tipping habit, but whether people will tip machines is TBD.
Yeah. And how big are these fleets? I think I read somewhere recently that Waymo has about 700 self-driving cars operating nationwide. How many AVs are we talking about in these cities?
We're starting in the hundreds, and then we'll expand from there.
Mm-hmm. I know you don't want to discuss the economics, even though I would love to learn what the split is there.
I'm not going to tell you.
But you did recently talk about the margins on autonomous rides being lower than the margins on regular Uber rides for at least a few more years. That's not intuitive to me because in an autonomous ride, you don't have to pay the driver. So you would think the margin would be way higher for Uber. But why would you make less money if you don't have to pay a driver?
So generally, our design spec in terms of how we build businesses is any newer business, we're going to operate at a lower margin while we're growing that business. You don't want it to be profitable day one. And that's my attitude with autonomous, which is, again, get it out there, introduce it to as many people as possible. At a maturity level, generally, if you look at our take rate around the world, it's about 20%. We get 20%. The driver gets 80%. We think that's a model that makes sense for any autonomous partner going forward, and that's what we expect. I kind of don't care, honestly, what the margins are for the next 5 years. The question is, can I get lots of supply? Can it be absolutely safe? And does that 20-80 split look reasonable going forward? And I think it does.
Yeah. I want to ask about Tesla. You mentioned them a little earlier. They held an event recently where they unveiled their plans for a Robotaxi service. Yeah. Do you consider Tesla a competitor?
Well, they certainly could be, right? If they develop it, it's exactly the same thing that you said, which is if they develop their own AV vehicle and they decide to go direct only through the Tesla app, they would be a competitor. And if they decide to work with us, then we would be a partner as well. And to some extent, again, both can be true. So I don't think it's going to be an either or. I think Elon's vision is pretty compelling, especially like you might have these cyber shepherds or these owners of these fleets, et cetera. Those owners, if they want to have maximum earnings on those fleets, will want to put those fleets on Uber. But at this point, it's unknown what his intentions are.
There's this big debate that's playing out right now about who has the better AV strategy between Waymo and Tesla, in the sense that the Waymos have many, many sensors on them.
Yes.
The vehicles are much more expensive to produce. Tesla is trying to get to full autonomy using only its cameras and software. And Andre Karpathy, the AI researcher, recently said that Tesla was going to be in a better position in the long run because it ultimately just had a software problem, whereas Waymo has a hardware problem, and those are typically harder to solve. I'm curious if you have a view on this, whether you think one company is likelier to get to a better scale based on the approach that they're taking with their hardware and software.
I mean, I think that hardware costs scale down over a period of time. So sure, Waymo has a hardware problem, but they can solve it. I mean, the history of compute and hardware is like the costs come down very, very significantly. The Waymo solution is working right now, so it's not theory, right? And I think the differences are bigger, which is Waymo has more sensors, has cameras, has LiDAR, so there's a certain redundancy there. Waymo generally has more compute, so to speak. So the inference of that computer is going to be just better, right? And Waymo also has high definition maps that essentially makes the problem of recognizing what's happening in the real world a much simpler problem. So under Elon's model, the weight that the software has to carry is very, very heavy. versus the Waymo and most other player model where you don't have to kind of weigh as much on training and you make the problem much simpler as a compute problem to understand. I think eventually both will get there.
But if you had to guess, like, who's gonna get to sort of a viable scale first?
Listen, I think Elon eventually will get to viable scale, but for the next 5 years, I bet on Waymo, and we are betting on Waymo.
I'll say this: I don't want to get into an autonomous Tesla in the next 5 years. I'm gonna let somebody else can test that out. I'm not gonna be an early adopter of that.
FSD's getting pretty good. Have you used it recently?
I have not used it
recently.
recently.
It's really good.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, it's really good. Now, again, for example, the cost of a solid state LiDAR now is $500, $600, right? So why wouldn't you put that into your sensor stack? It's not that expensive. And for a fully self-driving, specialized auto, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Elon has accomplished the unimaginable many, many, many times, so I wouldn't bet against them.
Yeah, I don't know. This is always, my secret dream for you. Obviously you should stay at Uber as long as you want. When you're done with that, I actually do think you should run Tesla because I think you would be, just as you've done Uber, you'd be willing to make some of the sort of easy compromises, like just put a $500 frickin' LiDAR on the thing and we'd go much, much faster. So anyway, what do you think about that?
I have a full-time job, and I'm very happy with it.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, the Tesla board is listening. Just keep this guy in mind. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know if the Tesla board listens to you two.
Good
That's
point.
true. I
Fair.
made too many ketamine
We're
jokes.
opening up the board meeting with an episode of Hard Fork, everybody.
They can learn a lot from this show.
What's your best guess for when, say, 50% of Uber rides in the U.S. will be autonomous?
I'd say close to 8 to 10 years is my best guess, but I am sure that'll be wrong.
In which
Probably
in which
closer to 10.
direction?
Probably
Yeah.
closer to 10. What's
closer
that?
to 10?
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Most people have overestimated. Again, it's a wild guess. The probabilities of your being right are just as much as mine.
I'm curious if we can sort of get into a future imagining mode here, like in the year, whether it's 10 years or 15 years or 20 years from now, when maybe a majority of rides in at least big cities in the U.S. will be autonomous. Do you think that changes the city at all? Like, do the roads look different? Are there more cars on the road? Are there fewer cars on the road? What does that even look like?
So I think that the cities will have much, much more space to use. Parking often takes up 20, 30% of the square miles in a city, for example, and that parking space will be open for living, parks, etc. So there's no doubt that it will be a better world. I think that there will be more transportation. Again, every single time the cost and safety of transportation has improved, the demand for it goes up as well, which is why we do think being shared is a very, very important component of this future world. But I think you will have greener, cleaner cities, and you'll never have to park again, which I think is pretty cool.
I'm very curious what you think about the politics of autonomy in transportation. In the early days of Uber, there was a lot of backlash and resistance from taxi drivers, and they saw Uber as a threat to their livelihoods. There were some well-publicized cases of sort of sabotage and big protests. Do you anticipate there will be a backlash from either drivers or the public to the spread of AVs as they start to appear in more cities?
I think there could be, and what I'm hoping is that we avoid the backlash by having the proper conversations, right? Like this will, now historically society as a whole, we've been able to adjust to job displacement because it does happen gradually. And, even in a world where there's greater automation now than ever before, employment rates, et cetera, are at historically great levels. But the fact is that AI is going to displace jobs. What does that mean? How quickly should we go? How do we think about that? Those are discussions that we're going to have. And if we don't have the discussions, sure, there will be backlash. There's always backlash against societal change that's significant. We now work with taxis in San Francisco, and taxi drivers who use Uber make more than 20% more than the ones who don't. So there is a kind of solution space where new technology and established players can win. But I don't know exactly what that looks like.
But that calculus does not apply to self-driving. It's not like the Uber driver who's been driving an Uber for 10 years and that's their main source of income can just start driving a self-driving Waymo. It would defeat the, you don't need a driver. So
no, you don't need a driver.
It's not just that they have to switch the app they're using. It's that it threatens to put them out of a job.
Well, listen, could they be part of fleet management, cleaning, charging, et cetera? That's a possibility. We are now working with some of our drivers. They're doing AI map labeling and training of AI models, et cetera. So we're expanding the solution set of work, on-demand work that we're offering our drivers because there is part of that work, which is driving maybe going away or the growth in that work is going to slow down, at least over the next 10 years. And then we'll look to adjust. But listen, these are issues that are real. And I don't have a clean answer for them at this point.
Yeah.
You brought up shared rides earlier. And, back in the day, I think when Uber X first rolled out shared rides, like I did that a couple of times. And then, I don't know, I got a raise at my job. And I thought, from here on out, I think it's just going to be me in the car. How popular do you think you can make shared rides? And is there anything that you can do to make that more appealing?
Well, I think the way that we have to make it more appealing is to reduce the penalty, so to speak, of the shared rides. I think the number one reason why people use Uber is they want to save time. They want to have their time back. And a shared ride you would get about a 30% decrease in price historically, but there could be a 50 to 100% time penalty. Yeah. We're working now.
Well, you might end up sitting next to Casey and Newton.
That would be cool. That'd be amazing. Although
Dara.
I would feel very short. Otherwise, I would have no complaints. People, so far we've heard, don't have a problem with company. It really is time. And they don't mind riding with other people. There's a certain sense of satisfaction with riding with other people. But we're now working with both algorithmically and I think also fixing the product. Previously, you would choose a shared ride and you get an upfront discount. So your incentive as a customer is to get the discount, but not to get a shared ride. So we would have customers gaming the system. They get a shared ride at 2 a.m. when they know they're not going to be matched up, et cetera. Now you get a smaller discount and you get a reward, which is a higher discount if you're matched. So part of it is customers aren't working against us and we're not working against customers, but we're working on tech. We are reducing the time penalty, which is we avoid these weird routes, et cetera, that's going to cost you 50% of your time or 100% of your time. Now, in autonomous, we will, again, you talk about value of autonomous. If we are the only player that then has a liquidity to introduce shared autonomous into cities, that lowers congestion, lowers the price. That's another way in which our marketplace can add value to the ecosystem.
Got it.
Speaking of shared rides, Uber just released a new airport shuttle service
Yeah.
in New York City. It costs $18 a person. You book a seat. It goes on a designated sort of route on a set schedule. I don't have a question. I just wanted to congratulate you on inventing a bus.
It's a better bus. You know exactly when it's coming, picking you up. There's an employee shuttle here that we use. And just knowing exactly where your bus is, pick up, knowing what your path is, real time, it just gives a sense of comfort. We think this can be a pretty cool product. And again, is bus going to be hugely profitable for us long term? I don't know, but it will introduce us to a bigger audience to come into the Uber ecosystem. And we think it can be good for cities as well. If you're in Miami, by the way, over the weekend, we got buses to the Taylor Swift concert as well. So I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, look.
You can wear your beads and all that stuff.
It should not be hard to improve on the experience of a city bus.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Wi-Fi
I like
reserved.
city buses. When was the last time you were on a city bus?
Well, I took the train here. So it wasn't a bus, but it was transit.
He doesn't take shared. He doesn't take bus.
I'm a man of
This
the
guy
people.
is
I like to ride public
you're an
transit.
elitist.
No,
Yeah.
I would love to see a picture of you on a bus sometimes in the past 5 years, because I'm pretty sure that's never happened. Let me
I
ask you
think
this.
we can make the experience better.
So far I've resisted giving you any product feedback, Dara, but I have this.
You've already given me a new job. Thank you.
That's right. But before
I really
you take
appreciate
it,
that.
Before you take it, there is one thing that I have always wanted to know the explanation for. And it's this. At some point in the past couple of years, you all, when I ordered an Uber, started sending me a push notification saying that the driver was nearby. And I'm the sort of person, when I've ordered an Uber, Dara, I'm going to be there when the driver pulls. I'm not making this person wait, okay? I'm going to respect their time. And what I've learned is when you tell me the driver is nearby, what that means is they're at least 3 minutes away and they might be 2 miles away. And what I want to know is, why do you send me that notification?
We want you to be prepared to not keep the driver waiting. Maybe we should personalize it.
I
think that's a good question, which is depending on whether or not you keep the driver waiting. I think that is one of the cool things with AI algos that we can do. At this point, you're right. The experience is not quite optimized. But it's for the driver. It's for the driver.
Totally. No, I
Time
get
is
it.
money.
And if I were a driver, I would be happy that you were sending that. But you also send me this notification that says the driver's arriving. And that's when I'm like, okay, it's time to go downstairs. But it sounds like we're making progress on this.
I think the algorithm just likes you. It just wants to have a
yeah, they know that I
conversation
love my
with
rides.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Casey has previously talked about how he doesn't like his Uber drivers to talk to him. And this is a man who
doesn't share. My God!
Listen,
this man likes to coast
Casey,
through
I
life
thought so
in a
highly of you
cosseted
before this.
bubble. I mean,
here's what I'm saying: if you're on your way to the airport and it's 6:30 in the morning, do you truly want a person you've never met before asking you who you're going to vote for in the election? Is that an experience that anyone enjoys?
By the way, I drove, and reading the rider as to whether they want to have a conversation or not, I was not good at the art of kind of conversation as a driver.
Were you too talkative?
Hey, no. Hey, how's it going? Are you having a good day? Going to work? And then I just shut up.
Yeah.
And have a nice day.
To me, that's ideal.
That was it, but I don't know if that's...
No, that's perfect. That's going to give you all the information
I'll be your
that you need.
I'll be your driver any day.
This is Casey's real attraction to self-driving cars, is that he never has to talk to another human.
Look, you can make fun of me all you want. I am not the only person who feels this way. Let me tell you.
No, when I check into a hotel, same thing. Like, did you have a nice day? I'm like, yeah, but where are you coming in from?
Get into it.
Yeah, just key.
All right, well, I think we're at time. Dara, thank you so much for coming.
Really appreciate it.
It was fun. Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.